From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your regular weekly intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Charu Sharma, once again in Bangalore. Thankfully, the rain's moved away a bit, so golf and tennis are back on the agenda. That's before I run away to the Saurashtra Premier League in Rajkot, which is going to follow this heavy-duty IPL action.
Hi, it's Jim Maxwell on the road here. I'm about an hour and a half from Melbourne at a place called Dalesford, very pretty spa town near the goldfields. And I'm actually in an old railway carriage that's been converted into accommodation. You can probably tell if you're watching the roof of the old carriage is it's still in pretty good nick. Anyway, it's a change of pace and a change of environment because it's cool. It's winter outside. It's about 8 degrees.
And I'm Alex Hartley. I wish I could say I was here in sunny Manchester, but I'm not. Obviously, it's raining, but it wasn't at the weekend when I was playing for the Thunder in the Charlotte Edwards Cup, and I'll be joining Welsh Fire in the 100.
Alex, I feel sorry about the weather, but great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, let's move on to the first thing on Stumped this week. It's crunch time in the Indian Premier League, and what a campaign it has been, from the fabulous achievement, the orange cap achievements of Jos Buttler, who can do no wrong, to the ducks of Virat Kohli, who luckily for RCB is sort of redeeming himself these days. From the pace of Umran Malik at 157, what a discovery, to the spin of Yuzvendra Chahal, who now wears the purple cap. Let's pick out some of the highs and lows of people watching around the world. Now, I know, Jim, it is rather late in Australia. You're not particularly fond of T20 yet. What's caught your eye?
Well, the thing that's caught my eye is the recurring fickleness of the T20 game. The fact that the new teams in this IPL have replaced the old strong teams that normally do well. So that must say something about the quality of the players, obviously. But for me, T20, for all its enjoyment and its entertainment, is without doubt the ficklest form of the game. So upset's always on the cards.
You know, in India, of course, it's still there's a lot of controversy, a lot of chatter about the IPL. People seem to be watching in very large numbers, except there is a minor controversy about the ratings, which seem to have dipped. Now, it is an expanded campaign, so there are more matches and more time taken for the IPL, but I just wonder if there's a sort of a googly there in terms of the rating agencies, because I believe that the mechanism or the metrics is slightly different. However, that's been a bit of a dampener because some new media rights are coming up for the next 5 years, and if there's a reduction in the ratings, then that could be a bit of trouble. But the action, I must say, has been fantastic, and particularly so because of the relative success of the two new franchises, which does lend some thought to the fact that all the players are professionals. It doesn't really matter which team they play in, but Jim and then Alex, what is your thought about the fact that two new franchises can walk into what is a very strong league and do better than anyone else, Jim?
Well, it must come down to the organisation and the quality of the players, and the fact that the IPL can expand without reducing the quality of its overall output says something about the depth of players, certainly in India. And maybe there are a couple of old hands that could be shuffled around as we go into this format again next year. But it's very refreshing, obviously. And let's hope that it can be sustained. I mean, I'm not sure out of all of this, are we seeing the demise of one or two teams as a result, or is the competition healthy across the board and all these teams will be around again next year?
Well, I think it's a very temporary demise, if at all, or just a sort of a shift to the back room for Chennai and Mumbai, but I'm sure they'll be back strong because, after all, there's a fair amount of equality in the way that players are distributed. But Alex, you're no stranger to franchise cricket, so let me ask you the same question differently, though. Does it matter which franchise you play for? Does it matter in terms of performance? Or you say, well, regardless of who I'm playing with, I'm a professional, I'm going to go and do my job anyway?
I think some players will have some loyalty to teams, and I think some players in the IPL would have been disappointed had they have not been picked up by their original team. I mean, can you imagine DJ Bravo not in a CSK shirt? I don't think he would have been very happy had he not been there. But I guess the more franchise cricket we see around the world and the more franchise cricket these players play, when they join a new team and they get picked up by the Lucknow Super Giants, they have nothing to lose. They have to gel as a team straight away, and they have to just go out there and kind of show off. They have that freedom to show off. And I guess it's worked for these two new teams that have come into the IPL because they've played some fantastic cricket.
Well, just going on to one of the new teams who are already in the final. We're waiting for the big one this weekend. Hardik Pandya seems to have taken to captaincy like duck to water, has done very well individually as well, leading from the front for Gujarat Titans, who've, of course, won most of the matches in the league stage and are already in the finals, being a new team. Jim, that's just, I mean, on the face of it, a phenomenal achievement.
It is, and I hope this can be sustained at the end of the season, but it just shows something about the quality, as I mentioned before, particularly of the local players, that they can manage to do something as strong as this. I was interested in your remarks about television and ratings. Are you saying that the ratings have suffered as a result of the expansion? How's that working out in terms of television audience? Because it's not going to survive without the big television audience that it's built up since its inception, is it?
Well, not just television, of course. These days, Jim, there's a lot of digital viewership as well, something that I'm not particularly familiar with. So I suppose there are different angles of viewership coming in all the time. But there has been a fair amount of news in India. I wonder if it's floated down to Australia or to England about the fact that the ratings have dropped fairly percentage-wise, significantly at 30%, which is massive. But I also believe, or I'm privy to some kind of information from the ratings agency, that they have they've changed the metrics. They've taken away some of the free-to-air viewership that was also a part of the total viewership. So it's a little more complicated rather than just looking at the face of it. But it will worry, potentially, the IPL authorities or the BCCI authorities, because this new media rights is coming up and they're asking for twice as much as the previous one for the next 5 years, which is a massive amount of money. So this news about the ratings is not going to be taken very favorably at all. But yet, wherever you go, of course, cricket's such a big juggernaut in India. Everyone's always talking about it. And still, it seems to me, easily the biggest, most powerful sporting property in our part of the world. It's a busy time for women's cricket at the moment. We've had the Fabric Invitational Tournament, which I saw a fair amount of, happening out in the Gulf, which was fantastic for players from other parts of the world who don't normally play cricket or a lot of cricket. And we've got the second season of the 100 to look forward to in the next few weeks. And, of course, the first ever appearance of cricket at the Commonwealth Games coming up. That should be pretty big. And at the time of recording, of course, the Women's T20 Challenge is ongoing. But will it be the last year ever? Because there is a lingering suggestion of an inaugural Women's IPL next year. We've been talking about the Women's IPL potentially for the next, last 4 or 5 years here on Stump, but it may actually happen now. Should the Women's IPL take off? Your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've been saying it for what seems like a few years now. I think this is the third edition of the Challenger Cup, and every single year, as females and cricketers, we're quite disappointed that it's only two teams, because we've seen how successful franchise cricket can be in the women's game with the 100, the KSL, the Big Bash out in Australia, and we're just dying for a women's IPL because we know what it will also do for India women's cricket. You know, it's actually scary. The talent that India have in the women's game, in their international side, and what they could have in their domestic side. You know, Smriti Mandana has come out and said, I'm not the best. I'm not the best opening batter that we've got in India. We just haven't found another one yet. And with a women's IPL, we'd probably find that within the first year.
And Alex, would you be happy to play in it? We say it's not about the money, regardless, you'd be happy to. And how many teams do you think there should be to begin with?
Yeah, the team question's a great question, because I genuinely don't think it should be 10 like the men. You know, that's a lot of teams. Maybe if we could start with 6 and go from there. So the first year you have 6 teams, or could you have 8 teams? Who knows? I think 10's too many, but I think 3 is not enough. It's really not enough. I'd love to play in the women's IPL. You know, quite often most of my following is from India, and they're always saying, why are you not here? Why are you not coming over here? I don't think I'm good enough, so if I can't play, I'll commentate.
Oh, Alex, please, let me make a note of this. Okay, you're in. But this 3-team thing, just to give my views, it has been a sort of a force feed, just fitted in because there was a clamor to make sure that something was done for the women. It's certainly, it's suboptimal for sure. I do feel over the years, we've been talking about this in Stumped as well, that the women's IPL has not happened yet because the authorities in India, perhaps for good reason, feel that the depth is not there yet. So it's a chicken and egg. Do you do the women's IPL and then get more people following, more women playing the game, or do we wait for more women to reach a certain standard where the potential cynicism, I'm trying to choose my words with care, the potential cynicism of the standards that we see in the women's IPL is not too low, because we need people to flood in and say, wow, like it's a spectacular thing and what a discovery it's been, rather than, well, some matches were really poor, so on and so forth. So that's what's held the authorities back, according to me. But Jim, is there room for a women's IPL right now? Because there is a fair amount of women's cricket already happening, and yet, of course, most women, I think Alex would agree, would say that there are not enough tournaments, not enough competition around the world around the year.
Well, there probably aren't, and there'll be some commercial reality that comes with the expansion of the women's game. I mean, we've already seen the women's BBL in Australia have enormous success. So I can't understand why, if you're going to have overseas players playing in the women's IPL, you can't have a few more teams. Okay, softly make the start, get it going, make sure it's viable, and then move on. But at least it's happening. For me, India have been far too slow in trying to get this going.
One of the many reasons that the women's IPL has not taken off in India is, and this is just my version, it's not an official version, is that commercially it would not work, in that there isn't enough commercial support in India, and that it would be a sort of a losing proposition, or not a surplus proposition, and which is why they were just taking their time to wait for the commercial circles to expand. But Alex, do you feel that commercially women's cricket is picking up rapidly, not only number of matches around the world, but the sponsorship support, the commercial support, do you think is rushing in?
Yeah, I do. I think you only have to look at the WBBL and the domestic setup that we've got here in England, where teams have got their own sponsors now, because quite often we jumped on the back of men's teams and they'd say, right, okay, this is a sponsor for the men's team and we'll do the women as well. But now we've got individual sponsors. Commercially, there are people there. I played a Thunder game last week and 45,000 people were watching on the live stream. Now, if that doesn't tell me that people are interested, I don't know what will. There's a kind of consensus around women's cricket in the world that the BCCI are waiting for India to win a world tournament before starting an IPL, and that's our thoughts as players. But we often talk about, you can't just win a world tournament without having a really good domestic structure as well, because the players aren't going to get better and better without playing regular competitive cricket. And it's one of those things, we want it to happen, and it's just waiting for the authorities to catch up.
Next on Stumped, why are batters paid more than bowlers? And how is Afghanistan transforming German cricket? Why does South Africa struggle to produce black test batsmen? And how does the weather impact who wins? Now, these are some of the many questions answered in the new book, Criconomics, which has been authored by leading sports economist Stefan Szymanski, who's written many wonderful books, and an award-winning cricket journalist, Tim Wigmore. I'm delighted to mention that Tim joins us today on Stumped. Welcome to Stumped, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Tim, let's begin with an overall sense of why did you write such a book, and what is it all about?
So Stefan wrote, as you said in the introduction, he wrote Criconomics, which was a really fantastic eye-opening book on football, kind of using numbers to see it in a different light. And we got talking and wanted to do something similar for cricket. There's a lot of kind of received wisdom and stuff in cricket, so we wanted to kind of see how much that actually stacks up, how much of it is true, and with a mixture of numbers and sort of interviews and our own analysis, try and get some of the big questions shaping the game today from a global perspective.
Well, the whole process of writing a book is really a fascinating journey, so more on that as we go along. But I'm particularly interested in the chapter on India titled An Urban Sport in a Rural Country. More about that, Tim.
People forget how bad India were. You probably won't even remind me, but how bad India were for so long. So Indian Test team basically lost 2 tests for every one it won until 2000. So they were a pretty poor team, notoriously very unreliable away from home, especially. And now India, we've seen famously, obviously, at the Gabba last year, India were the kind of second/third 11, competed an incredible victory in Australia, and they're now basically invincible at home. And, you know, that they're clearly becoming more and more of a force. And actually, we're trying to understand why that was the case. And so if you look at where India have got their players, they used to basically rely on only 6 states for their players. And so, yeah, these which produce about 3/4 of India's players. So if you weren't from these states, it was very, very difficult to break into the national team. And so there was basically a lot of talent that was being wasted. And we see that share has dropped a lot over time. And now it's only about half of India's test players come from the big 6 states, half from the rest of the country. So it's become more meritocratic.
Later in the book, there's a case for reparations section regarding what the future of women's cricket looks like. I'm interested to know, what do you think the future of women's cricket looks like?
For almost every country, the amount of money that they can invest in women's cricket is still linked to how much money they get for their men's team. And so women's cricket needs to create a system where funding is not linked. And a good example of this is Thailand. So we've seen the Thai women's team, obviously they played in the T20 World Cup in 2020, and their men's team, I think, ranked like 60th in the world. So the men's team are miles off. And there's still a bit of a risk that because their men's team obviously are not very good and not going to be getting a lot of funding, that impacts their women's team. So I would argue that the ICC be a bit more interventionist here. So, for example, wouldn't it be great if the ICC were to fund, say, 150 contracts for women's cricketers around the world, meaning that wherever you were from, if you were good enough, you could be a genuine professional. And obviously countries like Australia and England and India would, you know, maybe it could be outside that system, or they'd be topping up their players, but it'd be a system to ensure that the best women's cricketers can A, be professional, and B, be professional in their own country. So we've seen with there was a case of Kim Garth, who was a very promising young player. She moved, and, you know, very close to Ireland, and she moved to Australia. Basically, it was only way of her really improving as a cricketer, and just being professional. And that's like a real loss. So she's gone from being one of Ireland's best players and helping to grow the game there to being like a good state player in Australia. And obviously it's not her fault at all. It's the system to blame. But that actually, you want to be growing to grow the game around the world. You don't really want that to happen.
Tim, I know the book's out now in late May, and it's already a bestseller. And I wish you the very best on behalf of Stumped for Criconomics. Thanks for joining us. Thanks
for having me.
But that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped on All India Radio. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at BBC WS Sport. And, of course, use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And check us out on YouTube as well. Go to BBC World Service YouTube. My thanks particularly to Alex Hartley. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex, this week. And Jim Maxwell. And to all of you for listening. Speak to you next week. For now, goodbye.
From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.